Okay, so I'm gonna start our meeting. So first off, let me just welcome you all. You're very welcome to our IoD SurreyConnect Director Briefing. And this morning we have Alec Sanderson, who's going to be sharing some insights, experiences and suggestions around survival in challenging times. Before Alec kicks off though, I just want to introduce you to our foundations, if you will. All of us are here to share. This meeting is being recorded. Please do make sure that you mute yourself. We don't want to enforce muting, so please make sure that you are muted yourself as we go through. If for no other reason, then your video will pop up on the recording of this meeting as somebody who just pops up and disappears, probably doing something you wouldn't want the public to see you doing. So please mute yourself. When we're in speaking mode, please be accurate, brief and clear. And please do share any ideas, insights, inspirations, links or anything else in the chat session. Alec will be taking questions. I will moderate those questions. Alec will be taking questions at the end of his presentation. Please mark your questions with a capital Q to differentiate it from your general chat and sharing in the chat. That'll make it easier for me to scan and to select the questions for Alec as a result of his presentation. You will see in the chat already that there is a link to the evaluation form for this session. Please do complete the evaluation form immediately you come out of this meeting. Myself and Polly and a number of the other branches now around the IoD, we're keen to make sure that this format works best for all of our members and our friends, and we don't really want to be second guessing stuff. So please do allow yourself 2 or 3 minutes to complete the evaluation form before you get on to the next thing on your agenda for today. I'm now going to back out and I'm going to hand over to Alec. And Alec, please take it away for your presentation.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Okay, so this talk is about surviving in challenging times. I want to sort of set expectations first. There is no magic potion. If you're looking for that financial formula or the leadership formula that gets you through really tough times, then there isn't one. But the things I've got in this presentation have lasted quite a number of years. I've made this talk must be 10 or 12 times now, and it started really in 2007 with that financial crisis. I've changed it for today. But you get the picture. So let's go. The curriculum for today is going to be a number of topics that you would traditionally find in most colleges. So psychology, we're going to look at economics, a bit about sports, business studies, some archaeology, which is a new one, media studies, and then of course some homework, which will be marked by Richard. And he's very tough. So the first thing we're going to look at is psychology. So volcanoes happen, and how you deal with it is described in a Kubler-Ross curve. And this was a person in the 1930s who researched it. In fact, Richard did a post on this last week, didn't you? You did a chat on this last week. So what actually happens is the y-axis is emotional activity and the x-axis is time. Any event that affects us, pretty much anything, one goes through a series of emotional activity stages. The first stage is denial. The second stage is anger. The third stage is depression. And then the fourth stage is action. This has been used a lot by all sorts of things. But what happens is any event that affects us directly, one tends to go through these stages. Now, they might not be recognizable, or they might be very recognizable. And things like depression don't mean clinical depression, for example. They just mean a sort of malaise in terms of very low emotional activity. So it is programming. It's not something that we should or could fight. It happens to everybody, and it happens in different stages, different times. So what actually happens when a big event hits a company is something like this. You get one person going through that curve like this, second person such, third person, and so on. And you can see that it's starting to look quite messy. Some people get stuck at different stages, and everybody takes a different length of time to transition between those stages. And everybody has different depths of feeling as well. And it's not just one event. So this is just a picture of one event, but of course it could be multiple events. So for example, if your company has a lost order, for example, and then one or two customers stop paying, so your finance department might be going through it a couple of times, whereas the board might be going through a slightly different stage. So this is actually what happens. This is the dynamics of people and how we work. Don't forget also that your suppliers and your customers might be here, because everything comes down to people in the end. It's all about us humans. And remember, it is programming. This is what we are designed to do. And if you want to read up about it, there's a lot out there. So given that that happens, you might have experienced this yourself. So if you're in your own business, or if you've experienced any other businesses, and a kind of difficult event happens, there's a lot of activity initially, which is that anger stage. Well, first you go into denial, then you go into that anger kind of stage. But then what happens is you get into this kind of depressive stage. So it leads to a general lowering of morale. And as I say, it's not just you, it's with your customers, suppliers, your whole chain of interactions. And it does feel like this. It feels a bit like Chernobyl, Pripyat rather. It's sort of a little bit lower. This is extreme. But it does feel like that. Sometimes it just feels very low, and you come out of meetings feeling quite gloomy, but maybe okay. And it depends on the leadership. So really that's what happens. And the problem with that is that it's a double whammy. The first whammy is that you have the issue that you're trying to deal with. And the second whammy is that you actually have poor resources to deal with it. And that's while you're going through that stage. And that stage can last quite a number of days or even weeks. Once you're out the other side, remember that emotional activity becomes higher, and that's when you start being able to act. So just a great example of this was I was doing some work, one of my customers was Marks and Spencer's in 1997. That was the first time they'd had a serious drop off in their share value. And up at Stockdale Park, just north of Heathrow, they had a big operational centre there, and they had a stock market ticker of their share price in the atrium, which almost everybody could see. And I was there the day after the stocks had started to shift downwards, and they were falling every half hour. And just about everybody was watching that stock ticker. They were not doing any work. So I had pretty much all day there, and I did very little during that day because everybody I was with, it was about 4 different teams. And they were saying, oh, you know, I was saving up for a car. Oh, that was my mortgage repayment. And that's that. And so not only did they have a problem, which was the first time in their history, really, they'd had a share shift, a negative share shift. Actually, they had an inability to deal with it. So when they needed to be looking after customers, when they needed to be getting on with stuff, this happened. And eventually, after about 5 days, they took that stock ticker down because it was causing so many problems. It is just the nature of how we work. So that's why it's a double whammy, really. I guess you might have noticed this sort of same thing. We'll come to that in a second. So the next thing we're going to look at really is some economics. But firstly, just summing up here. everybody goes through this Kubler-Ross curve, and some people get stuck, and there is this slow decline in morale. So on to economics now. So I'm not going to speak over this. I got some headlines, and it was all about falling off a cliff, roller coaster, edge of a precipice, and it's unprecedented use of unprecedented in the press. There was a great one in Private Eye, if you read that, fantastic. There's an unprecedented amount of unprecedented mentioned in the press, which I thought was hilarious. But every time that happens, you do get affected. It does hit you. So we're in this kind of really difficult times, aren't we? Terrible, terrible times. So I've got a few questions for you. You can unmute if you want to. So there are 3 questions here. In 1929 to 1933, there was the greatest depression the world has ever seen. Do you know what the percentage decline in the GDP was? And please don't look it up, cheats. I can see some of you like Googling it already. All recession in 21 OECD countries since 1960. There was a what percentage decline in GDP and over how many quarters? And severe recessions, that's the worst recessions, in 21 OECD countries since 1960. So this covers a massive period and a huge number of different countries, some of which will have far exceeded our experience of it. But can anybody guess does anybody know what the figures are like in those 3 little questions? Shall I tell you? There was a 6% decline in GDP in that depression. Of the 21 recessions, there was a 2% decline over 3.7 quarters. And on this one, there was a 5% decline over 4.9 quarters. Remember, that's a severe depression, okay? So why am I telling you this? Well, this is the UK percentage annual change in GDP. Wow, that is like what would I say? That's mid-Atlantic, isn't it? That's a big swell, 27-meter waves, everything else. Or is it actually? So I've leveled it out to 100. So that's really what it looks like in terms of change in the UK GDP since 1948. I would say that's more like ripples in my fish tank rather than a swell in the mid-Atlantic. So that's the 73 fall, that's the 79, that's the 90, and that's the 2007, sorry, that's the 2007. You can notice them, they are significant and they are dangerous. But actually, that's what it really looks like in terms of a line. Showing you the same thing, but actually in terms of GDP, there was a significant fall off in 2007 and 8, but actually that curve to me looks pretty robust. There was a hiccup and it lasted 2 or 3 years, but actually it wasn't long before we picked that up. So that's the whole history from 1948. So what's my point really? It is serious, but financial downturns are just an adjustment. So it is really, really different, of course, every time, and this one's different from the last one, but governments are unlikely to let retail banks fail. Governments will take control of markets. They'll take control of almost everything. And of course, this one is global. So this crisis is global. So everybody's in it together. The workforce is far more flexible now than it's ever been in its history. And people and companies are so much more agile than they have ever been. I mean, I've been around for quite some time, and I remember companies in the 70s and 80s, and their ability to change was absolutely hampered. It took years to do anything. Now, companies can change very, very quickly indeed. So it's all very good stuff. So what's my point really? Well, I think the point is the only real issue is the lack of confidence, and that lack of confidence is caused by uncertainty. So it's the unknowns that are hardest things to deal with. It's not the knowns. As Niels Bohr said, prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. When have we ever known? We have never known what is around the corner. You've all run businesses, some of you for many years. You all know that it's always very difficult to predict. In fact, it's impossible to predict. Any business plan that I've ever seen has never been met on the nail. Every prediction I've ever read has sometimes come true, sometimes not come true. So we've never, ever known about the future. So why is that any different now? So let's go through and look at it's really about what the real likely outcome is. So downturns are normal. Let's have a look at some sports. This is really how to dealing with it. So we're looking at whammy number 1 now. So this is about the ability for you to deal with that problem. So this is K2, and we're going to get to the peak, okay? And it's a bit like a military campaign or a really challenging sport. And there are 5 elements in this. And it's important to deal with each of these elements when you're dealing with the problem. And if you sort of replay this, or if you think back over it when you get to the end, you'll get what I'm talking about. So the first one is you must take control of the situation. As a leader, you must take control. And that doesn't mean arrogantly, that doesn't mean aggressively. It means you have to understand the situation and you have to take control. The second thing is you have to mentally and physically prepare. And that's a real key one, actually. I mean, you've seen the government's allowing us to get fit and all that sort of stuff. They're really worried about the health. Everybody knows this. Those of us who do sole consultancy now, I've run many businesses, but right now I'm doing a sole consultancy. If you've read the books on that, they say you've got to stay fit because it's down to you. This is the same thing. You have to mentally and physically prepare. I should have mentally prepared a bit more, but there you go. Physical is obvious, but just walking or housework helps. For mentally, try yoga, any mental exercise. There's tons of stuff out there. I'm not going to go with that one now, but actually it's really important that you are mentally and physically fit for this. So number 3 is remind yourself of what's at stake. This is really difficult because in crisis, and you'll have seen a number of documentaries maybe about serious accidents and things like that, if you don't tell yourself what's at stake, you don't act. And then what happens is it becomes too late. So you don't run for the doors, you don't run for the exits, you don't do certain things. That's a classic human thing. The military are trained to overcome that reaction. So the military are absolutely trained all the time, and top sports people also. So they are trained to overcome this. So the trick to that is remind yourself of what's at stake. It might be your family, it might be your house, it might be your employees, it might be your company and your livelihood. And it's really important to do that because otherwise you can be swayed by this feeling of, oh, everything's going to be okay, it's fine, I'll ignore it, it will go away. But it's a good thing to do. People say just ignore that sort of stuff, but don't. This is the key to success in challenging times. Remind yourself of what's at stake. The next thing is about communications. So stay positive, stay confident, and as business leaders, this is what we need to do. Now, be realistic. I've written it here and I changed the word at the end. So don't lose trust by telling porkies. Everybody knows what the situation is. So be realistic. This is difficult. This is unprecedented, but we have all come through some pretty serious lifetimes, or even our generations before us have had that, much more serious than this. Don't lose trust by telling those little lies and say, oh yeah, everything's all right, it's under control, and then you huddle into board meetings and people see you and they go, and you come out going, oh, that's really difficult. The trick is to be realistic here. Body language and general demeanor is really difficult to hide. So it's a case about, okay, this is going to be tricky, but let's move on, let's get this done. Try to avoid negative people and try to avoid the press. It really does rub off. Don't avoid realistic people, because it's too easy to create a team around you that just says, yeah, we're all great, we're all wonderful. You want realistic people, but you don't want negative people. So try to help them, or don't try to avoid them in truth. So the next bit is, number 5 is create a clear goal and a clear plan. So my speech around climbing K2, for example, will be something like this. I haven't climbed K2. In fact, I'm a bit scared of heights, so you would never get me up there. But the idea is, would be like this. We're all fit and we're well prepared. You know the route and you know the camps. Tomorrow we start at first light, 0500 hours. By Thursday, we'll be on the peak. check your equipment, keep your eyes on the weather, watch each other for signs of altitude sickness, and enjoy the climb. I've put some key things in there, which are the realistic bit, about watching each other. Don't just, hey, have fun, let's go. We all know what we're doing. Check your equipment, that kind of stuff. You see what I mean? It's about being positive, but people are looking to you to be that leader. I'm not talking about the high risks. Everybody knows those high risks. So really in terms of sports, it's take control, prepare, remind yourself of what's at stake, be realistic but positive, set a clear goal and have a plan. Now, whammy number 2. It's important to understand and commit to a strategy and why this differs from your norm. Anybody who knows me will know that I really like vision, strategy, that kind of thing, because it really gives you something to aim for. When you are in challenging time, you can throw away your existing business strategy and you can bring another one in. You can overlay this strategy, or you can embellish your existing company strategy, but don't forget you have a strategy. And it's really important. This will form part of your plan. So there are 3 primary business strategies that you can adopt. The first one is survival, the second one is advantage, and the third one is growth. You can call it what you like, but it's really important that you actually articulate this and say, hey guys, through this crisis, we are going to adopt this strategy. As I say, you can name it whatever you like. I'm just giving you some examples here. So the first one is survival. This one is act quickly and decisively. Get better at what you do. The clue is really in the term. It is you're surviving this. So it's really about you hit the storm on K2. It's unexpected. What are you going to do? So you're going to survive this storm and then see what happens out the other side. But our key remit is survival, which is a lot of companies at the moment. They are just in survival mode. But a lot of them don't say they are, they just are doing it. So get better at what you do. Show really good leadership skills, keep the morale high, trim messy processes, look for efficiency, not just cost saving. And my top tip here is when you're doing a cost saving trimming exercise, because cost saving is really easy to do because it's a financial bottom line and you can look at the numbers very, very easily. What's much harder to do, I mean, I can ask this question now. Look at your P&L. How many lines do you have on your income? 2, 1, 7, 12? How many lines do you have on your expenditure? I bet it's 20, 30. I've got, I think, 5 lines on my income and about 20 lines on my expenditure. That's usually the way. So what people do is find it easier to do the cost saving than they do to look at revenue generation. I always say, what a good idea it would be to actually invest just as much energy in revenue generation than it is in cost saving. And it's actually not that difficult to do, but it's harder because it's actually all about the soft stuff. It's all about selling, marketing, customer engagement, that kind of thing. But if you do that, what will happen is the morale will stay high. Because if all you are is cost cutting, which is sometimes what you have to do, then of course the whole company morale is actually quite negative. And you don't have to spend that much time on it. Your staff, your employees will probably know how to do this. You might not be out with your customers enough. You might not be earning that little bit extra from that one customer, that kind of thing. And there's a good point about this I make later on, is that you might not actually be out there with your customers. So this is all about labor optimization. It's about operational efficiency, back to basics, and a lean and mean operation. It is not about a zero company, and it's not about a sort of minimal company. Don't worry about that 10% growth that you were expecting. This is just about survival, and that's absolutely fine. Look at K2, look at all the mountaineers, look at all those high-performing sports people. They take rests, they take time out. They get stuck in storms. It doesn't matter. It's not important. It's just a blip. It's just a little wave we have to go through. So the next one, advantage. This is an advantage strategy. It's if you have capital, or if you can get capital, because capital is actually still pretty easy to get, is invest in innovation, new software, new processes, new methods, R&D. Train your staff. Even with furloughing, they can still train. And I know a lot of companies out there, and some of the charities too, are using this to actually train their staff up. It's an incredible advantage. Look at your processes, look at your suppliers. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to take advantage of this downtime. So everybody's in this downtime. Those cycling teams, for example, that use that downtime to actually, you know, lubricate their bikes, actually make sure the chains are running that little bit faster. They check the brakes, they check the gears, they do all that kind of stuff. The other teams that just go, wow, that was great. We're going to take a rest and let our bikes sit in the dust. They're not going to be as good. So this is a true strategy. It's take advantage of that situation. The third one is growth. So this one is plan for cultural and organizational change. M&As might become possible, and ensure that your governance models are in place, because if you let things run wild, as you know, all sorts of bad things can happen. But it's a real opportunity for growth now. Expand your geographic coverage, look at different countries, automate your HR functions, develop quality and audit functions, all sorts of things you can do this. You can still grow in these times, and there's nothing to stop you. I know one charity I'm on the board of, we have had unprecedented requirements for our services, and unprecedented investment as well from those people that we didn't expect. We were expecting to see a downturn. It's turned into totally opposite. And we're still not quite sure why. We actually know why, but actually we were not expecting it. So that you can grow in these times. So they're the three to read. Sorry, about growth. It's organizational and cultural change, governance models, looking at M&A, and all sorts of other things. The universe is yours. So pick one. And as I said, you don't have to call it that, but you can pick whichever one of these you like as a strategy. So, second to last, we're going to look at some archaeology now. I've run businesses since '86, so I have seen something like 4 recessions now. Each one of them, I've changed the business in some way, and I've always done very, very well. But I'm a tech business person, that may be quite natural. Also, I've run small businesses, not larger businesses. It's just that I might be lucky as well. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I can see some of you laughing. You know me too well. Right, so how much time do you spend talking about the issues? I know, and I've been in, I don't know how many meetings in the last couple of months, that quite a big amount of time I've spent in those meetings has been discussing stuff that we have no control over, like people's opinion on COVID-19, for example, and the press and what everybody else is saying, what everybody else is doing. That's natural. We have to do that. That's a good talking point. But actually measure how much time you're doing that. And there was one board meeting I sat at, which was 2 hours, and I kind of timed it, and it was something like 1.5 hours was spent just talking about stuff that we had no control over. That really could have just been done outside the board meeting in 10 minutes. And we spent almost no time talking about the future and no time talking about the customers. If you are in control of that board, which I wasn't, and I do admit I was party to that, it just dawned on me, hang on a second, I'm doing what I lecture about. Just watch out for that, because that means you're going to get that malaise at the end of the board meeting. And I noticed that people were very, very low. So I started to talk about the future and looked at education, for example. Where's that going? Where's tech business going, for example? You know, all sorts of things like that. So just think about that. How much time are you thinking about new stuff now? How much time are you really just saying, okay, well, this might be over in a year, it might be 2 years, whatever. It will be different, whatever happens. It might be over in 3 or 4 months for me. Who knows? But actually, what am I going to do when I'm going to spend more time at home working on my tan. That would be quite cool. But there's all sorts of other things you can do. So I've put together some things that I have actually experienced myself. And there's loads of them. So they're appearing on your screen now. All this stuff can mean new business for you. It certainly meant new business for me. So let's have a look at a few of these. Public sector. It's weird because with HiCom, I did a lot of 50-50 public sector, private sector. And always when there was a private sector slump, the public sector stepped in. And when there was a private sector hike, the public sector stepped back. It was absolutely uncanny. And I grew constantly through that. And obviously it's not uncanny, because that's how it kind of works, is the money swims around. Because I ran small businesses, the large projects splitting into small ones was one of the most amazing for me. We were never able to tender for those 50, 100 million pound projects. But when they canned those projects and started splitting into the 1 to 5 to 10 million pound projects, or even smaller, we were able to benefit from that. So I started going after very large customers and won quite a few. Companies relocate, companies and competitors losing ground, downsizing projects, charity sector, outsourcing, training, management buyouts, all this kind of stuff, R&D, environmental, everything changes. So those opportunities are always out there, and particularly with employees. In any bad time, of course, there's more people mixing around. Some stay put, as we know. It's not very easy, but lots and lots of stuff change. So it's really worth, I think, looking at this stuff. And I'm quite surprised still at how many people aren't doing this. They're just fighting for that sort of stuff. And they're spending so much time on the cost saving and the negativity side of it, rather than on the positive side. Now, I know it is really, really hard. I know it's very easy to say, and it's very, very hard to do. But it is something that can be done. And even those 10 minutes, in one of the companies I'm involved with, all we're doing is we're doing 15-minute little sessions about what's the future of this little sector, what's the future about this little sector. And it really creates a really fun environment, but it gives people hope. It gives people a real sense that you're doing something about it, and you're not that concerned about, this next year or two. You are concerned, that's for sure. But you're saying, yeah, okay, this might be over in 6 months. I might be back on my feet in 6 months. It'll be all okay. That's the psychology of this all. It's all about people. So have a look at some of this stuff. Come up with ideas. Now, the final thing is, I'm going to set you some homework. Oh, actually, no, we're all quite grown up, aren't we? You can set your own homework. So how about you identify the top five things that might bring you new work? How about you establish a task force looking at how your business environment will change in the next 2 years now, based on what you've seen? What will be different? And I bet almost every business will be different. And write it down, get someone to present to you. How about trying to speak to your customers for a virtual coffee? That was a classic 7 or 8 years ago when a good friend of mine, we were at a barbecue and he was really down. He worked as an IFA in the finance sector, fun enough. And he said, oh, it literally has fallen off a cliff, to use that cliche. And he and his business partner were just meeting. And I said, I wouldn't buy from you at the moment because you're so down. I said, come on, make it a bit more fun, loosen up, dude. That was my private conversation with him. What I said really was, hey, hang on a second, are you actually getting out and seeing your customers and seeing what they're really needing at the moment? He went, no, we've just been talking about it. And I said, well, worth a shot. And I was cycling about 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, and bumped into him. I was like muddy, crazy, and I didn't even shake his hand because I was so filthy. And he almost hugged me. He said, thank you, Alex, so much. He said, I've doubled my income in the last 2 months, more than last year. And he said, all I did was I got on the train and I spent every day of 1 week with my clients in London. Now, of course, you can't do that now, but he missed the point. It's a changing environment, changing needs, and he picked up a load more clients who were having trouble. So that's just one example. And I say, really easy to do when you're outside that business, very easy to see when you're looking outside. I'm not saying, and it's very hard to do it when you're inside the business. I have suffered and I've done all these things myself. I've made all these mistakes myself. And as I say, it's very easy when you look outside and you say, what would you do? Any one of us could look at each other's businesses and take that view and see what it looks like. So set your own homework. And I've got some top tips from the Fantastic Four. I was going to change this, but actually there's 4 of them, so it's really great. The first tip is stay positive but realistic. The second one is don't talk yourself out of business. You'd be surprised at how easy that is to do. Focus on your customers. And I know that's the mantra that's been all the way through business life, focus on your customers. But actually just see how much time you're spending on your customers at the moment. I know I'm not spending enough, that's for sure. Show good leadership and strong teamwork. These things are the critical factors in actually moving through a really, really tough time. So that's it, really. I've raced through this. There's a lot more detail, as you can see. I'm trying to cut back my own speech. It's very unnatural for me, but I've tried to, and I hope Richard's okay with it. 35 minutes.
You've done very, very well, Alec, I must say.
So really, now is the time for questions.
Okay, so over to you guys. Alec, thank you so much. That was a very, very good overview of a very big subject area. And there are no specific questions that I can see with a capital Q in the chat area. So we'll open it up. Please shout out your name first and your brief question, and we'll get Alec to answer it for you.
If at all possible.
If at all possible.
I mean, I'm reading some of the comments here. I mean, do just kick in if you have any questions about this. And someone like Roger said, my company went through severe cost cuttings, including redundancies 2 years ago. We were so close to the edge of 7 months due to lack of working capital. Since then, we have been lean, which brings its own difficulties. We are focused on improving, winning new work, and diversifying into new sectors. Did that work, Roger? It sounds like it did.
Hi. It's an ongoing situation. Obviously, I think when you, I'm sure others have experienced this. You know, when you can plot your own downfall because you predict running out of cash. You know, it very much focuses the mind on what you need to do. And it was incredibly difficult. Making people redundant is probably one of the worst and hardest things I've ever had to do. And these were some long-term employees as well, which made it, you know, very, very, very challenging. But it was always about survival of the company. And whilst you could sort of understand the difficulties you were putting people in by making them redundant, I had to focus on what was right for the business. When I say lean and making its own difficulties, when you come out of that and you're in a better position, a safe position, but not fantastic, the difficulty is, you know, you want to be able to reinvest and to add people back in where you can start to see growth. But that's a challenge because you're constantly looking at your cash flow saying, well, hang on a minute, I can't bring in another 2 or 3 people, you know, because you say it's about predicting the future. We don't know what work we're going to be winning. And that then makes everyone's jobs a bit harder. People start doing more, you know, roles, especially in a small company, as I'm sure many people have found. So we're good. We're good at the moment. We've secured some new work, and we're still trying to diversify into other sectors, which is mainly CBD oil and medical cannabis manufacturing equipment.
It's something a lot of companies have been through as well, I think. There was a really interesting one from Ginny. CEOs of my clients have more time to chat to me right now over a virtual coffee than they ever did before. No one that I have contacted has refused to meet. Definitely an opportunity during lockdown. I've found that, you know, I've recalled people for a 5-minute chat and ended up 2 hours chatting to them, because obviously we're all in social void at the moment. But it's really great. I've been really surprised at who's talked to me and who's wanted to talk. I've had 2 customers approach me in the last 2 months or last 6 weeks that I haven't seen for 2-3 years, and that's incredible. So the world is definitely changing out there.
Could I ask a quick question, Gilly? We'll come on to you, but before you make that any sort of addition to your comment, which is a great comment, can I just ask for a show of thumbs? How many people have found it easier to get hold of people over the past sort of month or so? How many people have found it easier? So just a show of thumbs so as I can see. So I'm now going to just scroll through. Keep your thumbs up. There's quite a few people who found it easier to get hold of people. Isn't that interesting? Gilly, off to you.
Just in addition to that, I think one thing I have found is that the conversations I'm having with those people are very much more personal. They're quite relationship building, surprisingly, even though you're not face to face. You know, someone who's got a dog in the background that's the same as mine, or you're visiting people's homes at the moment, and it's a kind of strange environment. And bear in mind, I'm in the finance industry. We're normally in London. It's all frantic and busy. It's been a revelation. I think the key thing for me is how we behave now is going to be a real foundation of what happens when we come out of this, in terms of how they see us as a business, how we move forward with more trust, because we have a slightly different relationship. If you think to contact someone not for any specific reason other than finding out if they're okay, and the same is true of my clients who are all private individuals. There's a lot of engagement that they're having with their clients, and the same thing.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. Any other questions out there?
I've seen one come through on the chat, and it's how many approach from Chris Cliff. How many approach cost cutting from the point of view of saving as much money as possible compared to a point of view of helping and supporting critical suppliers in tough times? Don't know if anyone can see that. So it's really how many of us have done the cost cutting in terms of actually just saving as much. I think it doesn't depend on, certainly on the companies I've been involved with, it's down to what strategy we're adopting and how critical your suppliers are.
Cost cutting recently, we put a plan together of what we planned to cut and how much it was going to save the business. We had a monthly target of how much money we wanted to save, so we could start to add it together. But equally, I went to every single customer we had and begged them to help us out. So I had customers on 60, 90-day terms, and they paid me next day, because I basically said, unless you keep paying me, I'm not delivering your work. So it wasn't just the negatives of where we could save money. It was also getting all our suppliers, our key suppliers, and our key customers to buy into what we were trying to achieve, and the fact that we're trying to continue. It was challenging, but ultimately we came through it, which is a fantastic result.
Yeah, and I think again, it's about that positivity. Don't forget things like joint ventures or even partnering with your competitors is now possible. There's all sorts of opportunities where some of your competitors will be losing part of their business, or wanting to shut down part of their business, or wanting to hive off part of their business. There's tons of opportunities like that to say, hang on a second, could we work together here?
Absolutely. And I might have mentioned it in a meeting, or I might have put a blog out on it, but I have a small mindshare group, and we're all trainers, and we've known each other for years, and we have sort of meeting every sort of month, 6 weeks. And I've always thought it to be a nice thing. I was really happy that I had that sort of peer-to-peer sort of contact, and we could sort of chew the fat over a lunch, and we could hold each other to the fire, our feet to the fire, and get commitments that we're going to make changes. And I always thought of it as a nice to have, but we now do that on Microsoft Teams, and we do it every week. It's a quick half hour, and it's gone from being a nice to have to being sort of almost a necessity and a must have. And what I was taking for granted, I now realize the richness of what it is. And I think there's something about that as well, about that sort of sharing of ideas. And you touched upon it, Alec, when you were talking about sort of getting a task force together and asking questions about what 5 things could we do to get more business, and what will the world look like in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, and how can we make ourselves better able to sort of work in that sort of environment. And
I know it is hard when you're really up against it, dealing with furloughing employees, that kind of stuff. But actually, it's worth looking at. There's a couple of great comments I'm reading on the chat now. So from Rob Smith, it says CIA: control 90%, influence 10%, and appreciate 0. How to allocate your time in meetings and life generally.
Yeah, Alec, I was taught that about 30 years ago when I first started work, and I've stuck by it ever since. I put that up simply because you said about people talking for an hour and a half about something which was irrelevant. They couldn't do anything about it. My first response to that was, who on earth was chairing the meeting? Because obviously they weren't.
I'm not telling you. It wasn't me.
Okay.
There's another great one from Steve Coburn. Crisis doesn't create character, it reveals it. And it's a bit sexist now, but there was a really old saying, which is, again, in private eye, I chuckle over that magazine. It lightens up my life no end. But it was, no, if you got it, who takes private eye? Does anyone read private eye?
No.
Great. If it says, cometh the hour, cometh the man, and there's a picture of a certain world leader on it who you can guess, not English. And it was hilarious, and that's exactly what it means. But Steve's made a very better point. Crisis doesn't create character; it reveals it.
Yeah.
So it's really, what are you
Absolutely.
like? And that's why I like these shows where, you know, we're all at home. That's your character. That's you. That's who you are. Just trying to read some more of the chat. Yeah, from Richard.
Feel free to chip in, guys.
Yes, and Rob again. As Einstein said, avoid negative people, as they will, I guess they will see a problem for every solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, or in my world, every silver lining has a cloud.
Yeah.
But yeah, remember, don't get rid of those challenging people, and don't get rid of those realistic people, because you do not want the complete BS type environment where everybody's just egging themselves up, and they're egging themselves up on a cloud of nothing. But it's the negative people that look for problems, and they can see problems before you've even come to it. And I get that actually quite a lot when I'm trying to get teams working on what the future of business will look like. Because particularly if they're operational, their first reaction is, yeah, but we don't have any staff. We've just gone through a cost cutting. How can we do that? We've not got any money. And I'm saying, hey, I want to look for what it really is like. And I know it's not easy, but if I can get a £2 million project underway, and I will find the funding for you to do that. That's a really big ask, but that's your challenge. It's to say, okay, I can come up with that £2 million. I reckon I could raise £2 million to do certain projects, as long as there's a good rate of return, because I've got the confidence to do it. Now that's me just being confident. Underneath, I'm going, oh, I'm not sure I can really do that. But it's actually, I've done it so many times, I now know that I can. And that's really where experience comes in.
There's a comment again, sort of apocryphal sort of comment, that necessity is the mother of invention. And a good few years ago, I sort of borrowed that and said necessity is the mother of innovation. And I think, you know, as business leaders, we all need to innovate, and whether that's innovating our business model, innovating our sort of delivery model, but looking at ways to innovate and overcome an obstacle can actually be a real good spurt driver to growth. And I know that I morphed my business, you know, in 2007, 2008, because it was no longer going to be sustainable flying to Moscow 4 times in a year, or more or less having an office in Vienna for one client, where I did training and support every month, and half the people flew into Vienna for that support. Although a lot of my stuff is done online, a lot of my training has been done online since 2008. I've had to sort of innovate again, and you know, I'm now doing stuff that I never have done for almost 15 years, which is run semi-public workshops for my clients. So instead of me being called and being asked, Richard, when can you come to us, give us a few dates in September, I'm now running sort of closed public workshops for my clients, where I allocate days, or, you know, half days, and I invite them to drop 1 or 2 people into that workshop. And, you know, I was never going to do that stuff again, but it's proving to be, you know, popular with my clients. So, you know, it's probably not as profitable, but it's been flexible for my client. I would never have thought of doing it if it wasn't for COVID. And it's allowed my business to be more flexible in the way that I respond to clients. So you know, necessity is the mother of innovation, really, I think, anyway.
There's two great more posts. Andrew Jameson says crisis has meant a possible 2 new clients. And Steve,
That's very
what is the Stockdale paradox, Steve?
So Stockdale paradox, I spoke about it in my COVID diary on Friday last week. Richard, you'll need to help me out. Jim, the guy did Good to Great. Jim, you're on mute, Richard.
Jim Collins.
Jim Collins, that's it. Jim Collins interviewed a guy, Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war, and the Stockdale paradox is all around confronting the grim, brutal truth of where you are, but also maintaining an unwavering faith that you're going to get out of it. And it was interesting when you read it, that if you are overly optimistic, if you're too optimistic, it was the optimists who didn't survive the prisoner of war stuff, because they always had a unrealistic view that they were going to get out of this very, very quickly. The pessimists didn't survive either because they never had the energy to remain positive. And one of the things I'm struggling with over the last sort of 6 weeks or so is that Stockdale paradox. It's around how can I face the truth of the situation we're in with my team without then erring too much onto the negative, but without going too positive. And it's really interesting balance for leaders to try and get their head around, because if you go too optimistic, you'll just come across as somebody who doesn't understand the situation that you're in. Yeah. I think it pretty much speaks to what you've been talking about in your presentation, Alec.
It's a very, you know, there was a lot in that presentation. I distilled it from many hours, and there are some very subtle points in that which are very important. It is that bit about being realistic, because people know when you're being too optimistic. People know when you're being too pessimistic as well. But it's really hard to get that right balance. And actually, Winston Churchill did a great thing, which I kind of mirrored, and a lot of actors, obviously all actors do it, but if you rehearse the kind of stuff you're going to say with your teams beforehand, you pick up the nuances of how it comes across. And he used to spend hours and hours and hours, because he wasn't actually a confident speaker, actually just practicing how he was going to deliver that. Because it's not really, and I spoke to Steve before about it, and Richard, it's not in actually the words you say, it's in how you say it. And it's, you know, kind of what the principle is that comes across that's really, really important. So it's all about that very subtle leadership trait. And it's integrity, it's your personal integrity. You know, people have to trust you.
Yeah, absolutely, Alec. And I think that's absolutely vitally important. And again, I mentioned this in my notes to members who came on the 8:59, and you know, there's a whole pile of people who are telling me now that the hard comms of the half-hour, 45-minute Teams meeting or the half-hour business Zoom meeting, even though there's loads and loads of those going on, they don't feel as connected with the business as they were before, because of course all those soft comms are no longer available. And it has always been about how we come across, not necessarily what we say. And we've got to work better and harder at coming across, I think, in a digital first world.
And as Ginny said, what you do now really determines, I can't remember what exactly you said, but it was what you do now determines what you will be in the future, what you'll be like in the future. It's very, very pertinent.
Could I just ask Benjamin Ellis? Benjamin, you raised a point in the chat. Could you just phrase that as a question, if possible, mate?
Oh, that's a challenge. So it was that list of the climbing prep. I thought was a very helpful structure, because we're talking about communicating with staff, and I really like the elements of that structure, but I didn't quite get to write it down in terms of the kind of prep and mission and communicating that in a way that is positive but realistic as well.
So your five steps there, Alec.
Yeah. I mean, what I can do is we can share some of this, but let me go through them. Is that what you meant? Those 5?
The 5
Yeah,
steps
that was
going up.
exactly it.
Yeah,
Shall I share again, or
go for it.
just a few clicks away?
While you're finding it, I think that my background is comms, and I think the structure of communication for people is so important right now. It's very difficult for people to process stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, having a nice structure like that is helpful for people, I think.
This one you mean? So the first one is take control of that situation, and then mentally and physically prepare, and then remind yourself what's at stake. This one. Then communicate, and this one's about stay positive, stay confident, be realistic, and the body language and your general demeanor is really hard to hide. Avoid negative people and avoid the press, and that's speech. So it's really create a clear goal and a plan. Was that what you meant, Ben?
That was it. Yes, particularly that bit, the kind of clear goal and the plan, the way you described that as well, in terms of like checking your equipment and that balance of making sure that team members kind of use their own nous, as it were, I guess.
Yeah, it went like this. We are all fit and well prepared. So you're kind of staying where you are. Guys, we're good. We can do this. You know the route, you know the camps. So you're iterating the plan. Tomorrow we start at first light. So you're now issuing saying, right, we're going to do this. We're going to start at 0500. By Thursday, we'll be on the peak. So that's the confidence bit. We will be there. Check your equipment. Keep your eyes on the weather. Watch each other for signs of altitude sickness, and enjoy the climb. So that's the kind of thing. Actually, it took me quite a long time to write, and it's still not anything like perfect, but that's the kind of thing that I would use. So there's none of this kind of rah stuff. That's just my style. But it is confident. It's like, we're going to do this, team. But you have to make your own. You can't pick this. And I say that's why I wrote it, because it's more my style, but it won't suit everybody.
Thanks, Alec. Could you just, yeah, that's cool. Thanks so much, Alec. That's great. Thanks for that question, Benjamin, because I think that sort of series of questions as we sort of climb the mountain, I think that's probably a good basis to close from. So the conversation can continue either online or by email or by the IoD Surrey group on LinkedIn. Would be very interested to sort of hear further sort of input to this. And just to wrap up before we close, first of all, a very, very big thank you to Alec. Thank you, Alec. You know, you're so solid on all of this stuff, and I'm delighted that we were able to get you to sort of kick off our sort of series of online sort of learnings, if you will, from each other. And the next one we have is Emma Pendry, who is going to be sharing some insights, information, ideas, and information, I said that twice, around navigating insurance risks. So looking forward to learning from Emma on May the 4th, and that booking is now available online. Do get in touch if you think you've got anything to share with the members. I know that Paul, you asked a question a couple of weeks ago. Paul Hopwood, you asked a question a couple of weeks ago and made some generous offers. If anybody feels they've got something that they can contribute in the terms of what Alex has done and in terms of what Emma's going to be doing on the 4th of May, then please do get in touch. We will see. We'll sort of put it through the IoD system and see if we can get some learning from our members together. That's very much on the cards. And please do complete the online evaluation form. We're finding our way here in terms of how we're going to be doing this stuff. So I've posted another link to the evaluation form. Any and all comments will be greatly received and welcome. So please do complete that, and we'll just polish this up and continue polishing the diamonds as we go forward. So with that, I think we're coming up to 11 o'clock, and all that remains for me to do is to say thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe, stay strong, support each other, and we'll see you on the next event. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Great to see you. Really great.
Thank you. Bye all.